The wind in Wyoming could strip a man to the bone, but Jackson Cole, the undisputed king of this dusty corner of the world, barely noticed it. His ranch sprawled across the territory, a sea of grass and horseflesh that could swallow 3 counties whole. The fortune he sat on was obscene, enough to buy and sell governors. Yet he found himself restless, craving something the grit and grime of his life couldn't offer. He had a peculiar fascination with men of learning, a type as rare as summer snow in these parts. One bitter noon, with flakes of white drifting down like lazy ash, he was perched on the second-floor balcony of the town's only saloon, cracking sunflower seeds. He was idly planning an escape to the East Coast, to see for himself the kind of refined men who filled books, when a rickety bus shuddered to a stop. A man in a simple, threadbare coat stepped out. When the wind caught his sleeves, they billowed empty and wide. As he bent to retrieve a dropped book, his fingers, pale as fresh cream, emerged from his cuffs. Jax found himself staring. He nudged the dozing ranch hand beside him with the toe of his boot, telling him to go find out what kind of angel had fallen into their dust bowl. The information came back quickly. The man was Julian Vance, recently arrived from the east, renting the most dilapidated cottage on the west end of town. Jax was a man of direct action. The next day, he showed up with 2 thick-cut ribeye steaks. The door was ajar, and he stepped into a courtyard layered with the dust of neglect. Julian was inside airing out books. He looked up, his eyelashes fluttering like a startled sparrow's. Jax grinned, introducing himself and offering his friendship. Julian merely lowered his gaze, murmuring that he was unworthy of such an association. For 3 consecutive days, Jax's gifts were returned untouched. It was the first time in his life someone had so thoroughly stonewalled his explosive temper. News of his failed conquest spread. His friends came to the saloon to mock him, suggesting they go find some willing women at the bar. But Jax had lost interest in such pursuits. His friends joked that perhaps he wasn't interested in women at all. The accusation struck a nerve, reddening his face. He was 20 years old and had never been with anyone, and his first genuine attempt at courtship had ended in humiliation. He tried to stay away from Julian's cottage, but his dreams were filled with the man's face. Cool, annoyed, resentful. He couldn't stand it. At a loss, he sought advice from his older brother, a man who'd seen more of the world through his business dealings. His brother was not shocked by Jax's confession of his interests, knowing that such things were more common in the cities. He was more concerned about their father's reaction. Jax pleaded with his brother for help, a childish desperation he hadn't felt in over a decade. He insisted he was serious about Julian. After a long night of discussion, his brother relented with a plan. On a brilliantly sunny day, Jax put on a new turquoise shirt, slipped a pair of heavy gold bracelets into his pocket, and had his cook prepare a basket of delicate pastries. He drove to the West End cottage himself. He found the gate unlocked again but stopped himself, remembering his brother's advice. Men like Julian valued propriety. He knocked and called out, asking if anyone was home. He straightened his collar and ran his tongue over his teeth, ensuring he was presentable. Julian emerged, leaning against the doorframe for support before he could speak, his body racked by a series of deep coughs. In just a few days, he seemed to have shrunk inside his faded shirt, looking as though a strong gust of wind could carry him away. Jax rushed forward, pushing a pastry toward his mouth and asking why he'd let himself get so weak. Julian's eyes widened as he tried to swallow, but another coughing fit seized him, turning the corners of his eyes red. Jax instinctively moved to pat his back, but Julian flinched away, the sudden movement making him gasp for air. Once he could breathe again, he looked at Jax with clear, cool eyes, stating that they were from different worlds. Jax's heart sank. For the first time, he regretted not finishing school. He managed to say that he could learn, that he could read. He added that he was rich, extraordinarily so, and that Julian could have all of it. A strange, pitying smile touched Julian's lips as he explained that he had no interest in men and asked Jax not to force the issue. But his brother had also said that persistence wears down resistance. Over the next several weeks, Jax tried every method he could think of to win Julian over. He sent tonics, a fur-lined coat, even summoned the best doctor from the county seat. Every attempt was rebuffed. The most painful rejection came when he brought a stew he had made himself. He knew Julian's constitution was weak and had chosen the most tender cut of lamb, simmering it for hours. As he reached the cottage, he tripped on the doorstep, spilling the hot stew over the back of his hand, which immediately blistered red. Julian stood in the doorway, watching his clumsy display with a detached coldness. He sighed softly, telling Jax that a man should have some shame, that a forced connection would never work. Jax knelt, picking up the spilled meat, unable to look up. He mumbled that he just wanted to do something nice, that he'd heard lamb was good for building strength. Julian's voice was quiet but sharp, each word a needle. He said that Jax's kindness was a burden, that being pursued by another man had made him the town's laughingstock. Julian then leaned against the door, his arms crossed, the weariness in his eyes undisguised. He told Jax that his frail body could not withstand such relentless attention. Jax Cole had never been denied anything he truly wanted. In that moment, all his patience evaporated. He stood up, took the pot with the remaining stew, and smashed it on the ground. Julian simply told him not to let the door hit him on the way out. Jax turned back, his jaw tight, and promised that this wasn't over. That night, under the cover of darkness, he used a mild sedative to disable Julian and carried him from the cottage, slinging him over his shoulder and taking him to the ranch. He'd used a smaller dose, worried about Julian's health, which meant Julian woke up halfway there. By the moonlight, Jax saw the rope marks chafing his wrists raw, and a strange pang of guilt shot through him. He deposited Julian in a clean, prepared room in the barn, his voice intentionally loud and harsh. He declared that Julian would stay there until he agreed to be with him. In truth, the room was cleaner and warmer than Julian's rented cottage, and Jax had secretly placed a new down comforter inside. He then spent a miserable, anxious night sitting outside the door. At sunrise, he went in to check on him. Julian was lying on a pile of fresh hay, pretending to be asleep. After a night in the barn, his cheeks had a healthy flush. There was none of the fear or panic Jax had expected. Just as Jax was about to feign anger, Julian's soft voice cut through the silence, asking if the ranch belonged to him. Jax kicked the doorpost, confirming that from one end to the other, it was all his. Julian picked up a piece of straw, tilting his head. He mused that being Jax's partner might not be so bad after all. Jax froze, stunned by the abrupt change. Julian reminded him that a deal was a deal. Jax rushed home to tell his parents he was getting married. His father, initially thrilled, nearly shattered the family Bible against his head when he learned the identity of his new daughter-in-law. He roared about Jax being a disgrace, blaming his mother and brother for spoiling him. Jax calmly picked up the Bible, placed it back on the mantle, and told his ancestors he was sorry. But if his father wouldn't approve the union, he and Julian would have to elope. His father's beard trembled with rage. Jax was a prodigy with horses, the only reason his father tolerated his wild ways. Dressed in a fine suit for the small, private ceremony, Julian sat on the edge of the bed. A touch of color on his cheeks made him look like he was blushing. Jax approached nervously, catching the faint scent of medicinal herbs. He suggested they should turn in for the night. Before Julian could reply, he was overcome by a violent coughing spell. As Jax patted his back, he saw a trickle of blood seep through the fingers Julian held to his mouth. Jax was terrified. Julian waved a weak hand, explaining it was an old condition from his childhood. Naturally, they did not consummate the marriage that night. Jax stayed by his bedside, his heart aching as he watched Julian's brows furrow in a troubled sleep. Over the next 2 weeks, Julian's illness came and went, often accompanied by high fevers. Jax offered a huge reward for any doctor who could help, but several came and left, shaking their heads. Finally, a clean-shaven, perpetually smiling middle-aged man named Mr. Sterling arrived, claiming he could treat the ailment. Mr. Sterling was remarkably effective. A few doses of his medicine brought Julian's fever down. However, he sternly advised that Julian needed absolute rest and must avoid any strenuous activity, especially intimacy. Frustrated but concerned, Jax had no choice but to comply. Still, he asked Mr. Sterling if some small affections were permissible. The man, glancing nervously toward the bedroom, stammered that they were, as long as things did not get overheated. So, after Julian finished his bitter medicine, Jax would feed him a piece of honeyed candy, stealing a quick kiss in the process. Julian would turn away in annoyance, but never with real anger. One evening, Jax stumbled upon Julian bathing. Through the steam, the lines of his neck and shoulders were exquisitely graceful. Lost in the sight, Jax knocked over a screen. Julian sank into the water in alarm, glaring at him with wide, wet eyes. That night, Jax had a vivid, erotic dream. He woke to find himself in a state of disarray just as Julian entered the room. Julian understood the situation at a glance and turned to leave. Jax, shameless, grabbed his arm, begging for help, pleading with him. Julian stood rigid for a long time, so long Jax thought he would refuse. Finally, he told Jax to lie down. Overjoyed, Jax complied. Julian covered the lower half of his body with a blanket. When Jax asked if he couldn't watch, Julian told him to be quiet. The brief, electric touch of his fingers was almost enough to make Jax pass out. Afterward, Julian immediately went to wash his hands, his expression impassive, but Jax saw the flush that crept up his neck. His heart swelled with certainty. Julian had to care for him. Why else would he agree to such a thing? The following months were consumed with Julian's recovery. On nights when his coughing was severe, Jax would stay awake, applying warm compresses to his forehead and back. Once, Julian murmured in a nightmare, begging someone not to leave him, not to abandon the little monster. Jax clumsily patted his back, whispering that he was there, that he wouldn't leave. In his sleep, Julian buried his face in Jax's palm, his breathing evening out. In that moment, Jax felt that if he could just keep Julian safe like this forever, it would be worth anything. After that night, he sensed a subtle shift in the way Julian looked at him. He was still quiet, but when Jax helped him, his body seemed less tense. On the night of the Harvest Moon Festival, his parents invited them for dinner. Julian said he wanted to see the moon from the ranch. It was the first request Julian had ever made, and Jax was ecstatic. He sent his regrets to his parents and immediately set up a lavish dinner on a hill overlooking the pastures, complete with thick blankets. Julian brought out a bottle of wine. Jax protested, but Julian quietly insisted he was well enough. Under the moonlight, they talked and drank. Jax finally worked up the courage to ask why Julian had suddenly agreed to be with him that day in the barn. Julian smiled softly, explaining that he had seen a magnificent, snow-white stallion among the herd. He reasoned that anyone who could raise such a horse couldn't be all bad. Jax was stunned by the simple reason. Staring at Julian's profile, softened by the moonlight, he silently vowed to cherish him even more. After a few more glasses, Jax's head spun. Julian helped him back to their room. Lying on the bed, emboldened by the alcohol, Jax tugged at Julian's belt, asking if tonight could be the night. To his surprise, Julian didn't push him away. He lay down obediently and even helped undo his own clothes. Jax kissed him, overwhelmed with joy. Julian's response was clumsy but willing. As Jax buried his face in Julian's neck, inhaling the clean scent of his hair, his consciousness began to fade. The rest was a blur. Looking back, he would realize how much he had missed. The high-collared shirts Julian always wore. The time he drunkenly pulled one open to see a faded scar near his collarbone, which Julian had claimed was from a childhood fall, pushing him away with a strength that seemed impossible for his frail frame. These details were like grains of sand, accumulating unnoticed until the dam broke. Julian Vance disappeared, along with 500 of Jax's finest horses and the key to his safe. The ranch manager trembled as he handed Jax a note. Contained a single line: "The wind here is too harsh. I'm not used to it. Take care." It was a lie. Jax's hands shook, first with fury, then with a surge of worry. How could someone so fragile manage such a massive herd of horses on his own? He set off immediately, riding south day and night for a month, following the faint trail left by the horses. The tracks led directly to Washington, D.C. Sitting at a hot dog stand on a busy D.C. street, he reached for his wallet and found only air. His money was gone, stolen in the crowd. As he wondered how to get away without paying, he overheard the vendor chatting with a regular. They spoke of the new chancellor, how he had swept into power, replacing the entire security detail with a private army mounted on superb horses from the west. The change had been sudden, a quiet coup that had unseated the old guard overnight. The vendor cautioned the customer to be quiet. The new regime had eyes and ears everywhere. Jax's hand, holding a half-eaten hot dog, froze. In the distance, bells chimed from the direction of the capital. Pedestrians stopped and bowed their heads as a procession of black cars approached. As the main vehicle passed, the wind momentarily lifted a privacy screen in the window. Jax saw the face inside with perfect clarity. It was Julian. He was leaning back against plush upholstery, one pale hand resting on his waist. His jawline was fuller, softened. Jax's hot dog fell to the pavement with a splat. That liar. He had stolen his horses and his heart. While Jax had been wasting away with worry, Julian had been getting fat. A surge of pure, unthinking rage propelled him forward. He ran toward the motorcade, yelling for his husband, shouting that his man had come for him. Security agents tackled him, slamming his face into the asphalt. He ignored the scraping pain, still yelling that he didn't care if Julian's waist was thicker now. He was promptly arrested and thrown in jail as a madman. He spent hours rattling the bars, demanding to see the chancellor, screaming that it was his husband. A guard on the left cleaned his ear, remarking to his partner that this was the third person that day to claim a relationship. The other guard noted that this one's reason was at least original. That night, he was moved to a solitary cell, guarded by a single, bored-looking man. A young aide entered carrying a food tray, and the guard snapped to attention. The aide introduced himself as Mr. Sterling and addressed Jax respectfully. Jax stared at him. There was something familiar about the man's posture, his voice. He realized with a jolt it was the doctor. It was all a lie. He kicked the food tray across the cell, shouting that he wouldn't eat unless Julian himself came to feed him. Mr. Sterling sighed and left. Soon after, the guard also departed, replaced by a man in a dark, hooded coat. The man lowered his hood, revealing the face that had haunted Jax's every waking moment. He looked nothing like a sick man now. The tailored suit he wore seemed to radiate power, making Jax's eyes ache. A wave of sorrow washed over him. He wanted to grab Julian by the collar and scream at him, but he couldn't bring himself to hurt him. He wanted to ask if he'd missed him, but his pride choked the words back. Julian spoke first, his voice even, asking why he wasn't eating. Jax turned to face the wall. Julian commented that he hadn't expected him to follow. That made Jax explode. He retorted that Julian had emptied his ranch, stolen his money and horses, and asked if he was supposed to become a beggar. Julian's lips thinned. He stated that the horses would be paid for in gold. Jax stubbornly refused, insisting he wanted his husband back. Julian's voice turned to ice as he said that Jax's husband was not here. Jax began to count on his fingers, his voice rising, reminding Julian of who had fed him his medicine, washed his feet, covered him at night, and steadied him when he was too weak to walk. Julian remained silent, but the tips of his ears turned pink. Finally, Julian turned his back, stating that Jax would be sent home in the morning. He warned that if Jax ever returned to D.C., he would have his entire family killed. Jax stood frozen. This ruthless man threatening his family couldn't be the same person who choked on his medicine. He stammered that Julian Vance wasn't even his real name. Julian paused at the door but didn't turn. Jax asked if everything from the very beginning had been part of a plan. The answer was yes. Even marrying him. Yes. His throat tightened as he asked about that last night at the ranch. He wanted to know if that, too, was part of the plan. The only sound was the crackling of the torchlight. Julian's voice was barely a whisper. First, it was. Jax seized on those words. He asked what had changed. Julian finally turned, moonlight from a high window illuminating half his face. His expression a complex mask of emotions Jax had never seen. He remembered Jax holding him, promising he wouldn't be lost. Julian's laugh was a bitter, self-mocking sound. Because of his unique nature, he and his mother had endured a difficult life. So that night, he had told himself he would be selfish just once. Not for power, not for a throne, but just as Julian, for Jax, he had allowed his heart to be moved. As promised, two men dressed as drivers put him in a car before dawn. But as the wheels turned, Jax peered out the window and saw they were heading into the wilderness, not back toward Wyoming. He asked the drivers if they were lost. One grunted that it was a shortcut. The other glanced back at him with cold eyes. Jax knew a lie when he heard one. An expert horseman knew his directions. He feigned an urgent need to relieve himself. The moment the car stopped, he bolted into the trees. He heard the rustle of pursuit and saw the two drivers moving with unnatural speed. One drew a knife, the blade glinting as he lunged. Jax, cornered, demanded to know who they were. The man simply said the Chancellor wanted him dead. The words struck him like a physical blow. Julian was really trying to kill him. Just then, three masked figures dropped from the trees. A flurry of motion and the two drivers were on the ground. Before Jax could ask who they were, a sharp pain hit the back of his neck, and the world went black. He awoke in a luxurious bed. Julian was sitting in a nearby armchair, reading by candlelight. A strange sense of relief washed over Jax, eclipsing any anger. Julian hadn't tried to kill him. Julian didn't look up from his book. He stated that those men weren't his, that his own people had been intercepted. Jax asked who wanted him dead. Julian dismissed them as a few rats, closing his book and rubbing his temples. He told Jax to stay in the residence for now and not go anywhere. Julian often worked late into the night. One evening, he returned to his chambers, leaning heavily on Mr. Sterling. He dismissed his aide and asked for water. Jax grumbled about him acting like a king but got up to brew a fresh pot of calming tea. Julian took one sip and pushed it away. Jax's temper flared as he asked if his hands were too dirty. Julian looked up, his face etched with exhaustion, and suddenly swayed, collapsing forward. Acting on instinct, Jax lunged to break his fall, becoming a human cushion. He grunted under the unexpected weight, complaining that Julian had gotten heavier. Julian, pressed against him, snapped back that it was his fault. Jax was baffled, asking what he had to do with it, but Julian fell silent and kicked him off, telling him to go sleep on the couch. After 2 days confined to the opulent suite, Jax was going stir-crazy. He missed the open spaces of his ranch. He couldn't understand why anyone would trade that freedom for this gilded cage. A new staff member was on duty that day, a young woman. Jax struck up a conversation, asking if she ever got bored. He told her about a little white filly he had back home, how she ran like a cloud. He said the horse was stubborn around pretty girls, just like her. The woman giggled. Jax seized the opportunity to ask what the Chancellor did all day. She mentioned meetings and paperwork, then lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. She said he sometimes visited the West Wing, where his fiancée, Lady Linnea, was staying. Her expression turned sly. The Chancellor had only been in power a month, but Lady Linnea was already with child. She was his clear favorite. The world seemed to roar in Jax's ears. That liar. He had claimed he needed to be cautious, that enemies were everywhere, yet he had time to take a fiancée and start a family. The staffer was still gossiping about Lady Linnea being the most beautiful woman from the coast. To hell with her beauty. Jax stormed back to the main chamber. Julian was just returning, still in his formal attire. Jax blocked his path, demanding to know who Linnea was. Julian stopped. He asked who told him. So it was true. Jax's hands trembled with rage. He accused Julian of marrying him in Wyoming while having a fiancée and a child in D.C., asking if it was all just a game. Julian's brow furrowed as he insisted it wasn't what he thought. Jax grabbed his sleeve, demanding an explanation. Julian shook him off, his voice sharp, reminding Jax that this was the capital. Jax shot back, asking what difference that made. In Wyoming, Julian had said he wanted only him. Julian looked away, a cold smile on his face. He asked Jax if he had been a saint back home, if he had never visited the women at the saloon. Jax slapped his chest, declaring that he had saved himself for Julian. Julian took a subtle step back, his hand moving instinctively to his stomach. He asked if Jax remembered that night. Jax scratched his head, admitting it was hazy, but insisted they had been together as husbands. He mumbled that he didn't know why his tolerance for alcohol had been so low that night, but promised he wouldn't be so rough next time. Julian's eyes widened. He asked if Jax wanted a next time. Jax said he did, but first Julian had to tell him what else he was hiding. Julian's gaze darted away. He told Jax that some things were better left unknown. It was the same evasive answer. Jax's eyes burned with unshed tears. He had given up everything for Julian, and he couldn't even get a straight answer. Julian took a deep breath. The truth, he said, was that Linnea's existence was a necessity, for Jax's own good and for the stability of the state. Jax scoffed at the idea of the state, sneering that his grand plan was to marry a string of women. Julian lowered his voice, asking what if he said that after this period of instability, there would never be anyone else. Jax was stunned into silence. Julian explained that the engagement was a temporary political maneuver. He had his reasons. Knowing too much would only complicate things. Jax looked at him, his heart a tangle of confusion, and asked what he was to him. Julian was silent for a long time before replying. Problem. A stubborn problem that he couldn't get rid of, who had followed him all the way to D.C. Jax looked at his tense back and laughed, a hollow sound. He said that Julian must have wanted him to follow. If he truly wanted him gone, he wouldn't have left a note. He could have had him killed in that jail cell. Julian sighed, his tone softening. He asked Jax why he thought he had gone to such lengths to take his horses. It wasn't just because they were the best. He explained that a conflict was brewing on the northern border, and the federal cavalry was poorly equipped. He needed his own, reliable supply of mounts, and only the coal ranch could provide them. But his position was precarious. If he had tried to purchase them officially, his enemies would have had him eliminated. So Jax realized Julian had been after his horses, with no intention of getting involved with him. Yes, Julian admitted turning away. But later, Jax prompted him. Julian's ears reddened, his voice hardening again. Later he discovered that while Jax was an infuriating man, he was undeniably a master horseman. With the government still unstable, he still needed the support of the coal ranch. Jax asked if his illness had also been an act. Julian confessed it was half true. He had a chronic cough, and the journey from D.C. to Wyoming had taken a severe toll on his body. Jax leaned in close, whispering in his ear that it sounded like the Chancellor still couldn't do without him. Julian glared, telling him not to be so smug. Jax grinned, retorting that if the Chancellor even thought about another fiancé, he'd make sure the entire cavalry was riding donkeys. Julian gritted his teeth, calling him a scoundrel. Jax slipped his arm around his waist, saying it was too bad, because he was stuck with him for life. Julian gently pushed him away and instructed a passing aide to have an extra blanket put on the couch that night. Jax gradually grew accustomed to life within the citadel, or perhaps he just couldn't bear to leave Julian. The man was a mess. He'd rub his lower back while reading reports and wouldn't think to ask for fresh coffee when his went cold. One day, Jax couldn't stand it anymore. He took the coffee pot from Mr. Sterling and poured a fresh cup himself. Julian glared up at him, muttering about propriety. Jax retorted, asking if propriety would keep him warm. He pushed the hot coffee into Julian's hand. Julian took a sip and grumbled it was too hot. Jax snatched it back, blew on it to cool it, and wondered aloud why he hadn't been so fussy back on the ranch. A faint blush crept up Julian's neck as he returned to his documents. From then on, Jax took over these small duties. It was strange. Julian was the most powerful man in the country, yet in his personal life he was helpless. His tie was always crooked, his hair was never quite right, and Jax was the one who got up in the night to pull the blankets back over him. Once, when Julian started coughing in his sleep, Jax instinctively reached out to pat his back. Julian turned and burrowed into his arms. When they woke up entangled the next morning, Julian panicked and kicked him out of the bed, furiously demanding to know who gave him permission to be there. Jax, rubbing his bruised hip, protested that Julian had rolled over on his own. Julian's face turned scarlet, and he refused to speak to him for the rest of the day. Jax started to learn his patterns. Julian was like a feral cat. He would allow affection on his own terms but would lash out if Jax initiated it. One moment he'd let Jax feed him a pastry. The next he would shove him away for trying to steal a kiss, claiming he had work to do. But even a bristling Julian was endearing. One evening, Jax teased him, whispering in his ear and asking if he could sleep in the bed that night. Julian threw a stack of papers at him, threatening to have him executed if he ever called him honey again. Jax just laughed and caught the papers, pointing out that since they were married, his execution would make Julian a widower. Julian was speechless for a moment, then just repeated his favorite word for Jax: scoundrel. Life fell into a routine, and Jax almost forgot he was in a fortress until he was woken one morning by strange noises outside the window. He instinctively moved to shield Julian, whispering that someone was there. Julian, half asleep, pushed him away, murmuring that it was just the changing of the guard. It was a stark reminder that beneath the surface of their domestic tranquility lay a constant threat. Julian opened his eyes slightly, a teasing glint in them, and asked if he was scared. Jax scoffed and pulled him closer, admitting that being chancellor seemed like an exhausting job. Julian was silent for a moment, then leaned his head on Jax's shoulder. He began to whisper Jax's name, over and over, his voice soft and vulnerable. Jax's heart melted. Just as he was about to tighten his embrace, Julian suddenly stiffened and pushed him away, coughing and announcing it was time to prepare for the morning's meetings. He was back to being the same frustrating, guarded man. Lately, Jax had felt a persistent sense of being watched. Julian seemed increasingly tired and allowed no one but Jax to attend to him personally. One afternoon, as Jax knelt beside his chair, massaging his swollen ankles, the doors to the office were thrown open. Julian reacted instantly, pushing Jax's head down to hide him beneath the desk. An old, richly dressed man with white hair strode in. It was Senator Thorne, the uncle of the former First Lady and a powerful figure from the old regime. He was followed by a trembling old woman. A folder slipped from Julian's hand and hit the floor. He whispered the woman's name, Nanny. Thorne sneered, asking if the Chancellor remembered the wet nurse he had so mercifully spared years ago. The old woman fell to her knees, begging for forgiveness, crying that her family's lives were at stake. Thorne announced that he was there to cleanse the court, his venomous gaze fixed on the space where Jax was hidden. He offered a deal. If the Chancellor dealt with the abomination, killed the rogue hiding under the desk, and married his daughter, Thorne would let his secret die with him. Julian rose slowly, his formal robes swaying. He asked if Thorne truly believed he could be threatened. Thorne just smiled, saying that Mr. Sterling was likely preoccupied at the moment. He stroked his beard, confident as a cat toying with a mouse. He suggested Julian try to access his inner strength to see what happened when he got angry. Julian's expression changed. He seemed to try something internally, then swayed, grabbing the desk for support as sweat beaded on his forehead. He asked Thorne when he had done it. Thorne strolled forward casually, asking if the Chancellor had been enjoying the new inkwell on his desk. He explained it was harmless except to those with child. For them, the herbs mixed into the ink were a potent agent that, over time, would destabilize a pregnancy. With Julian's recent emotional distress and attempt to use his power, Thorne surmised the effects would be kicking in right about now. Julian swore he would die before giving in to Thorne's demands. But Thorne was talking about a child. Jax was utterly confused. Thorne barked an order, and a group of rogue guards swarmed in. Jax shot up from under the desk, placing himself in front of Julian. He heard a pained grunt behind him as Julian collapsed. He spun around to catch him. "Julian, what's wrong?" he cried. Julian clutched at him, his face pale with agony. He gasped that the baby was hurting. The baby. The dark fabric of Julian's trousers was rapidly staining a deeper crimson. All the strange behavior, the sickness, the mood swings, it all crashed down on Jax with horrifying clarity. Julian was one of those rare men from myths and legends, capable of carrying a child. His child. Julian clung to him, tears streaming down his face, apologizing, saying he had planned to use the baby as leverage against him, but he regretted it. Jax's throat closed up. For the first time, he felt the full weight of his own powerlessness. Thorne's manic laughter echoed in the chamber. He called Julian a freak of nature, declaring this to be divine justice. Suddenly, a sharp cry came from the doorway. "Mr." Sterling stood there, no longer a humble aide but a fearsome figure in a dark uniform, a bloody sword in his hand. He was flanked by a squad of black-clad agents. He announced that anyone who protected the Chancellor would be rewarded, and anyone who had harmed him or Jax would have their families exterminated. The agents moved like shadows, their strikes precise and deadly. The rebel guards, so confident moments before, were cut down. Thorne's face went white with disbelief. He stammered that Sterling's forces were supposed to be miles away. By then, Sterling was beside them. Seeing the blood pooling around Julian, his face contorted with rage. "Medics!" he roared. By the time the doctors arrived, Julian had lost consciousness. A moment later, Senator Thorne's head rolled to a stop at Sterling's feet. Sterling told Jax to leave the rest to him, that the Chancellor needed him. Back in their chambers, the doctor knelt and delivered the devastating news. The Chancellor's body had suffered a severe trauma. He would likely never be able to conceive again. Jax went to the bed and gathered Julian into his arms. "Don't leave," Julian whispered, his voice hoarse. Jax promised he wouldn't. He told him to sleep, and when he was better, he would take him back to Wyoming. Julian asked if he meant it. Jax nuzzled his cool cheek, saying yes. They didn't need children. They would raise horses, hundreds of them. Julian remained unconscious for 2 days. Jax never left his side, hating himself for being nothing more than a rancher who couldn't protect the one he loved. Mr. Sterling and the doctors came and went, but Julian was too weak to swallow the medicine. Jax took the bowl, filled his own mouth with the bitter liquid, and gently parted Julian's lips, feeding it to him drop by drop. In his delirium, Julian mumbled Jax's name, his fingers clutching at his shirt. Jax held his hand, whispering that he was there, repeating his promise to take him home. Perhaps the words reached him. On the third morning, Julian opened his eyes. The first thing he asked was if the baby was gone. His voice was flat, his eyes empty. Jax pulled him, blankets and all, into a tight embrace. He told him it was gone, that they didn't need it. From now on, it would just be the two of them. Julian leaned against his shoulder and wept, silent, heartbreaking tears that soaked Jax's shirt. His recovery was slow and shadowed by depression. He would sit by the window for hours, staring into space. Jax sat with him, filling the silence with stories of Wyoming, of the vast grasslands, of foals learning to run, of sunsets more brilliant than any lantern in the capital. He promised to give him the gentlest mare on the ranch. A faint smile touched Julian's lips, and he reached out to touch Jax's face. "'Kay," he whispered. But the darkness of the citadel was never far. One day, Jax overheard 2 junior aides whispering in a hallway, speculating about the Chancellor's unnatural condition. He saw red. When he returned to the room, The bowl of medicine in his hand was shaking. That night, he suggested they retreat to a private estate to recover. Julian, propped against his pillows, looked at him with unsettling clarity. He'd heard Jax had killed 2 aides that day. Jax didn't deny it. Julian sighed, saying he never should have dragged him into this mess. Jax disliked that kind of talk, telling him they had been a single unit from the day they married. Julian agreed not to say it again. He then explained that Thorn may be dead, but his allies remained. To leave now would be to show weakness. Jax's response was simple: then kill them all. He took Julian's hand, his grip firm. Anyone who stood between them and Wyoming would die. Julian studied him for a long time, then asked what he would do if they could never go back. Jax leaned in, his nose brushing Julian's. Then you'd better be prepared to make me your first gentleman, he said. I'll turn this whole damn palace into a ranch. A real smile, the first in weeks, broke across Julian's face as he gently pushed him away. The rumors spread faster than they could contain them. A few days later, a group of senior politicians formally petitioned the chancellor to take a wife and produce an heir for the sake of national stability. Julian shattered a vase in the council chamber and came back coughing so hard Jax feared he would tear his lungs out. As he patted his back, he called for Mr. Sterling, telling him to find out where the petition had originated. Jax was now officially part of the chancellor's personal guard, a permanent fixture by his side. That night, Julian trembled in his sleep. Jax held him close, calming him as he would a spooked horse. In his dreams, Julian mumbled for Jax to take him home. Looking up at the ornate ceiling, Jax felt a cold resolve settle over him. If these people wouldn't let them leave in peace, he would burn their world to the ground. Mr. Sterling was efficient. The rumor had been started by a subordinate of Thorn's. Instead of a simple assassination, they began a quiet, relentless campaign. Sterling used the government's shadowy resources, and Jax used his own network of contacts from the West. They followed the trail, uncovering a web of conspirators. Every piece of evidence Jax provided became another nail in their coffins. Within a month, the opposition was purged. Julian finally began to sleep through the night. He watched Jax now with a mixture of awe and deep reliance. Jax, feeling smug, was massaging his shoulders one afternoon when Julian spoke softly, saying he must have been through a lot. Jax replied that cleaning up the stables for his husband wasn't so bad. After a long silence, Julian asked if he wanted to hear about his childhood. He spoke of his mother, a spiritual leader from a southern tribe who was treated like an outcast in D.C. He spoke of his own birth, a secret kept by his mother and Sterling. He recalled being 8 years old and overhearing staff insulting his mother, and how he had arranged for them to have an accident. He looked at Jax, his eyes full of shame, and asked if he was a bad person. Jax turned him around, pressing their foreheads together. You did good, he said fiercely. If it were me, I'd have filled in the well after. Julian's eyes filled with tears, which soon turned into laughter. To lift his spirits, Jax built a small stable in the residence garden, bringing in 2 gentle ponies from the Federal Reserve. He taught Julian how to feed and groom them. Julian touched a pony's neck, his eyes shining. They're not afraid of me, he marveled. Jax hugged him from behind. Animals know a good heart when they see one. He told Julian that when he was stronger, he would teach him to ride. Julian leaned back against him, his voice small. He said he was given a pony once when he was 5. It was poisoned the next day. The court whispered that he had cursed it. Jax tightened his arms. I'm here now. No one will ever dare harm anything of yours again. The border conflict escalated. Requests for more horses flooded Julian's desk. He was so stressed he couldn't eat. Jax wrote a letter home. 2 weeks later, his brother arrived with 100 of their best horses and a promise to supply whatever else the military needed. The old guard in the government was stunned. Jax declared that the Cole family would supply 1,000 horses a year, as long as the chancellor was happy. Julian, his ears bright red, pinched him hard under the table. That night, Julian fretted that the treasury couldn't afford such a price. Jax bit his ear playfully, calling him a fool. He explained that the military would pay the full price, but the money would be diverted into Julian's private accounts. It would be his escape fund. When they had saved enough, they would disappear. Julian laughed until he shook, then grew quiet. "This isn't so bad," he murmured. Jax asked what he meant. "You managing the military logistics," Julian clarified. "Me handling the paperwork. It's better than being alone." Jax looked at the starlight reflected in his eyes and felt his heart overflow. He pulled him closer. "All right, but the moment you get tired of playing chancellor, we're going home." Outside, snow began to fall, thick and heavy, just like the day they first met. From the perspective of Mr. Sterling, 25 years ago, the gardens were aflame with autumn. He was carrying a tribute when he saw a young woman in a yellow dress chasing a butterfly through the grass, her hair coming undone. He was about to reprimand the girl for her lack of decorum when she turned. There was a smudge of dirt on her forehead, but her eyes were brighter than any imported crystal. She was the new dignitary from the South, soon to be the leader's new partner. She never learned the rigid rules of the capital. Once, she secretly slipped a piece of sweet cornbread into his pocket, complaining that the food here was too sugary. He started carrying bitter tea in his pocket after that, but she never gave him another piece of cornbread. The leader took her to his bed. He sat up all night in his office, staring at the stale piece of bread. When she was 7 months pregnant, a rebellion broke out in her homeland. Rumors spread through the medical staff about abnormalities in the pregnancy. He dealt with 3 of the gossips personally. The night she gave birth, a thunderstorm raged. She gripped his wrist, her nails digging into his flesh, and told him to save the child. When the midwife brought out an infant of ambiguous gender, he held a blade to her throat and informed her that a son had been born that night. The mother smiled weakly through her pain. Years of whispers about the witch and the cursed child followed, ending with her exile to a remote wing of the residence. He would sneak in food and find her holding the small chancellor, pointing out the stars. The boy was 5 when the winter heating was cut off. He held the shivering child to warm him, listening as he asked why people called his mother a witch. The next day, a maintenance man was found frozen solid in the snow, clutching the missing funds for the heating oil. The night the boy's mother died, he was away on business. When he returned, she was laid out, small and still. Beside her pillow was an old, worn pouch he had lost years ago. Today, the small chancellor finally secured his position. This morning, he went to the memorial chapel and lit a stick of incense. Beneath it, he placed a list. The ink was fresh. Of the 27 names of those who had conspired against the mother, the last one had been crossed off this morning.